This file was not meant to remain open, and yet it found you. Welcome back to the department. This evening we open archive entry 006. Among the oldest records preserved within the memory collection are repeated references to an unusual residential street that appears throughout thousands of personal recollections, despite no evidence that such a place has ever existed within ordinary geography. Department researchers first dismissed these reports as coincidence. Many remembered streets naturally resemble one another. Rows of terraced houses, front gardens, familiar corner shops, and evening lampposts are hardly uncommon. Similar descriptions alone provide little reason for investigation. The matter became considerably more curious when surveyors began comparing individual accounts in greater detail. Visitors described different towns, different countries, different decades, different childhoods. Yet every survey appeared to concern the same location. Not merely a similar one, the same street. For this reason, the department has provisionally classified the location as the street that exists only in memory. Unlike most documented places within the memory collection, access cannot be obtained deliberately. No recognized route has ever been established. The street appears instead during moments of quiet recollection. A familiar scent carried unexpectedly upon the evening air. The sound of distant children playing somewhere beyond sight. Rain falling upon warm pavement after a summer afternoon. The brief glimpse of an old brick wall through a train window. These small experiences occasionally interrupt ordinary life with an inexplicable certainty. Not that one has remembered a place, but that one has somehow returned to it. The sensation rarely lasts more than a few moments. Most dismiss it without further thought. A very small number continue walking. Those individuals sometimes arrive. Department records suggest that no visitor notices the precise moment of arrival. One simply becomes aware of standing upon a quiet residential street that already feels completely familiar. The sky is almost always overcast, not with threatening weather, rather with the soft brightness of an afternoon that seems unwilling to become evening. The air is still. Birdsong carries comfortably between gardens. Somewhere nearby a gate closes gently. Nothing appears unusual. The street possesses no remarkable architecture. Its houses are ordinary. Brick terraces, detached cottages, modest semi-detached homes. Low stone walls, neatly trimmed hedges. Small front gardens containing roses, lavender, climbing ivy, or washing left quietly to dry. Everything appears entirely unexceptional. Only gradually does something become difficult to explain. No two visitors describe the same houses. One surveyor recorded red brick terraces with white painted windows. Another documented sandstone cottages beneath slate roofs. A third described broad suburban avenues lined with maple trees. Yet each remained entirely convinced they had visited precisely the same street. At first the department suspected that memory itself was altering the reports. Subsequent investigation suggested something rather stranger. The street does not ask visitors to remember it accurately. Instead, it quietly becomes recognizable. Surveyor Eleanor Finch noted that she immediately recognized the house standing opposite the entrance to the street. She remembered waiting outside it while a school friend searched for forgotten homework. Subsequent examination revealed the house matched no address from her childhood. The architecture belonged to another country entirely. She nevertheless remained certain she had stood there before. Surveyor Ashcombe later experienced an almost identical certainty. The house opposite contained entirely different windows, a different garden, a different gate, yet he recognised it just as completely. Department researchers eventually reached an unusual conclusion. Visitors do not recognise the buildings themselves, they recognise the feeling of belonging amongst them. This distinction appears fundamental. The street preserves familiarity without requiring accuracy. Many surveyors have attempted to produce reliable maps. None have succeeded. Roads alter subtly between expeditions. Garden walls appear where hedges once stood. Lampposts occupy different positions. A side road remembered by one surveyor becomes a footpath in another report. The department's cartographic division has spent many years comparing these inconsistencies. Although individual features continually shift, one remarkable pattern never changes. Everyone knows exactly where they are. Not geographically, instinctively. Nobody becomes lost. Nobody asks for directions. Nobody wonders which road to follow. The street possesses the quiet certainty of somewhere walked hundreds of times without conscious thought. Visitors simply continue. Perhaps this explains why no expedition has ever been conducted with urgency. The street seems entirely unsuited to haste. People naturally slow their pace. They pause beside front gardens. They notice small things. A bicycle leaning against a fence. A football resting beneath a hedge. Curtains moving gently behind an upstairs window. The smell of washing carried upon fresh air. The ordinary details of neighbourhood life assume an unexpected significance. Department records repeatedly note an unusual characteristic. Nothing important ever happens here. No dramatic event has been observed. No extraordinary phenomenon interrupts the afternoon. No impossible architecture reveals itself. The street appears content simply to continue being itself. Initially, this disappointed several early surveyors. One expedition concluded after only 38 minutes, reporting that the location possessed remarkably little of academic interest. That assessment was quietly revised several years later. The department now believes the apparent absence of remarkable events constitutes the street's defining characteristic. Its purpose is not to preserve history, it is to preserve ordinary life before history notices it. A considerable proportion of the department's observations concern sound. Visitors frequently report hearing conversations taking place beyond open windows. None can later recall the words. Only the reassuring rhythm of familiar voices. A lawnmower starts somewhere further along the road. A kettle whistles. A dog barks briefly before settling again. The distant rattle of crockery drifts from an unseen kitchen. None of these sounds demand attention. Together they produce something increasingly rare. The feeling that nothing needs to happen because everything already belongs exactly where it should. The trees deserve particular mention. Every survey records mature trees growing at irregular intervals along the pavements. Species vary considerably. Chestnut, lime, beech, plane, apple. Occasionally cherry. The department has found no consistent botanical pattern, yet one observation appears in almost every field journal. Visitors instinctively remember climbing at least one of them. Branches appear familiar beneath the hand. The bark carries an oddly recognizable texture. Some recall hiding behind the trunk during games played long ago. Others remember sitting beneath its shade on warm afternoons. No two recollections agree. The certainty remains identical. One surveyor paused beside a broad horse chestnut and became convinced he had carved his initials into its bark as a child. The tree bore no such mark. He apologized aloud before continuing. When later asked why he had apologized, he simply replied, "It felt as though I'd mistaken an old friend for somebody else." The department considers this among the most revealing observations yet recorded. The street appears unconcerned with preserving factual memory. Instead, it preserves recognition itself. As investigations continued, researchers noticed that certain locations reappeared with surprising regularity. The corner shop is among the best documented. Its appearance differs in almost every report. Some visitors describe polished wooden shelves lined with jars of sweets. Others remember newspapers hanging beside the entrance. Some recall groceries stacked neatly upon worn timber counters. Others remember little more than a bell above the door and the reassuring sound it made whenever someone entered. The proprietor is never the same person, yet every surveyor records precisely the same impression. The shop always seems to contain one thing they had entirely forgotten existed. Not something valuable, not something rare, simply something ordinary. A favourite sweet, a packet of marbles, writing paper purchased before the first day of school, a bottle of lemonade no longer made. The object itself appears almost incidental. Recognition is the true discovery. Nearby stands a small bakery. Remarkably few visitors remember its interior in any detail. Instead, they remember its warmth. Fresh bread cooling somewhere beyond sight. The quiet movement of trays, flour upon wooden worktops, the sound of a rear door opening briefly before closing again. Surveyor Finch described the bakery with unusual simplicity. It smelled exactly like a Saturday. No further explanation accompanied the remark. None has ever seemed necessary. Beyond the bakery stands a modest bus stop. Every visitor remembers it. Every description differs. Sometimes it shelters beneath painted timber, sometimes beneath glass. Occasionally there is no shelter at all, only a solitary pole beside the pavement. Buses continue to arrive with reassuring regularity. Passengers board, passengers depart. The street continues its gentle rhythm. No surveyor has ever reported following one beyond the limits of the neighbourhood, not because such journeys are prohibited, simply because, while standing there, remaining seems the more natural choice. The department has never established why. Perhaps the street quietly reminds its visitors that not every journey requires a destination. Sometimes it is enough merely to know that one has arrived. Beyond the bus stop, the street bends so gently that no visitor has ever agreed where the next section begins. Some describe a shallow curve. Others insist the road continues perfectly straight. Department cartographers have compared every surviving survey map and reached no satisfactory conclusion. The geometry appears less important than the experience of walking it. One simply continues. After a short distance, many visitors encounter a small iron gate. Its position varies considerably. Sometimes it stands between two gardens. Sometimes it opens into a narrow footpath beside an old stone wall. Occasionally it appears at the entrance to what seems to be a modest public green. Yet despite these differences, the gate itself is recorded with remarkable consistency. Painted green, its hinges slightly worn, the latch polished smooth by countless hands. Almost everyone hesitates before opening it. Not from uncertainty, from recognition. Surveyor Elwood wrote that he remained standing before the gate for almost 10 minutes. When questioned afterwards, he struggled to explain why. "It wasn't that I remembered this gate," he eventually recorded. "It was that I realized how many gates like it had quietly disappeared from my life." The department has preserved that observation without amendment. The gate does not appear to guard anything extraordinary. Beyond it lies only another ordinary part of the neighbourhood, a narrow path, wildflowers growing beside old brick, a small bench beneath mature trees, children's chalk drawings fading upon the paving stones. Everything remains entirely commonplace, and yet the gate marks an almost imperceptible change. Visitors begin remembering not individual places, but forgotten habits. Waiting for friends without arranging a meeting beforehand. Cycling until the streetlights came on. Knowing which houses always kept spare footballs after one had flown over their fence. Calling for someone from the pavement rather than sending a message. These recollections rarely arrive as complete memories. They emerge as quiet certainties. The department believes the distinction is important. Memory often preserves events. The street appears to preserve ways of living. Further along, a modest stone bridge crosses a stream so narrow that many visitors scarcely notice the water until they stop. The stream itself changes from survey to survey, sometimes clear enough to reveal smooth pebbles beneath the surface, sometimes hidden beneath reeds, occasionally almost dry. Its appearance seems of little consequence. The bridge, however, is consistently described. Low, weathered, entirely practical. No inscription has ever been discovered. No notable architectural features have been recorded. Yet almost every surveyor pauses there longer than expected. Several have reported the curious certainty that they once leaned upon its parapet while thinking about something which seemed overwhelmingly important. None can later remember what that concern had been, only the surprising realization that it eventually ceased to matter. The department has found this impossible to verify. Nevertheless, similar observations appear with unusual frequency. Perhaps certain places remember not merely where we stood, but who we briefly were while standing there. The oldest surviving journal concerning the street predates the department's modern classification system by many decades. Its anonymous author wrote only, "Walked the familiar road again today. Nothing has changed. I cannot remember where it is." No further description accompanies the entry. The page following it remains blank. No explanation has been found. For many years, the department regarded this as little more than an intriguing historical curiosity. More recent investigations have encouraged greater caution. Several senior archivists have noted quiet similarities between this location and a number of previously catalogued memory sites. Whether those similarities represent a broader relationship has not been determined. The department has therefore made no formal conclusion. Further observation remains appropriate. One question continues to occupy researchers. Who maintains the street? Gardens remain cared for. Hedges are trimmed. Windows are clean. Paintwork receives attention before weather can damage it. Someone clearly performs these ordinary tasks, yet no surveyor has ever observed them taking place. It is simply accepted that the work has already been done. The department has occasionally recorded brief encounters with residents. These conversations are entirely unremarkable. People discuss the weather, the price of bread, children returning from school, a neighbour's roses, the arrival of autumn. No resident has ever acknowledged that the street is unusual. Indeed, they appear quietly puzzled whenever visitors ask such questions. One elderly gentleman reportedly smiled and replied, Why shouldn't a street be here? The surveyor recorded no suitable answer. Among all the department's observations, perhaps none is more consistent than the absence of urgency. Visitors rarely consult watches. Time passes unnoticed. Afternoons linger comfortably without seeming either long or short. Several expeditions believed they had remained for less than an hour. Their field journals indicated nearly 4. Others experienced the opposite. The department has never classified these discrepancies as temporal anomalies. The evidence suggests something gentler. Attention itself appears to move differently here. Modern life teaches us to notice what changes. The street quietly rewards those who notice what remains. No visitor has ever been recorded spending a night upon the street. Attempts invariably conclude before dusk, not because departure becomes necessary, rather because visitors gradually become aware that they have already begun leaving. The familiar afternoon softens. The sound of distant conversation becomes indistinct. The air carries the scent of evening rain. A single glance elsewhere proves sufficient. When attention returns, the street has gone. Visitors find themselves standing once more within the ordinary world, often beside an entirely different road. Many continue walking without immediate surprise. Only later does the certainty return. They have been somewhere profoundly familiar, somewhere they cannot locate upon any map. The department has long searched for an explanation. None has proved entirely satisfactory. The street cannot be understood as a preserved neighborhood, nor as a collection of remembered buildings. Its appearance changes too freely for either interpretation. Instead, the evidence increasingly suggests that the street preserves something considerably quieter. The feeling that once existed between people and ordinary places before familiarity became invisible. A front garden carefully tended over many years. A pavement walked every morning. The sound of neighbours recognizing one another. A gate opened so often that its weight became part of the hand's memory. These things rarely appear in history books. Few photographs preserve them. Yet they shape lives as surely as grander events. Perhaps they deserve an archive of their own. Department classification. Location type, memory place. Primary classification, residential memory environment. Access, spontaneous recollection only. Survey status, ongoing. Cartographic stability, unverified. Known temporal behavior, variable subject duration. Primary department observation. The location preserves familiarity rather than geographical accuracy. Cross-reference. See archive entry 001, the garden that remembers every season. Archive entry 002, the house of unfinished summers. Archive entry 004, the orchard of forgotten afternoons. No conclusive evidence has established whether these locations share a common origin. The apparent similarities remain under observation. No verified explanation has yet been recorded. Final note from the archivist. Closing this file, I found myself thinking less about streets than about recognition. Most of us pass through familiar places so often that we eventually stop seeing them. Perhaps that is inevitable. Familiarity has always been a quiet companion, but every so often something causes us to look again. An old gate, a row of houses, the smell of bread on cool afternoon air. For a brief moment, the ordinary returns to us as though we had been away for far longer than we realized. If the department has learned anything from this archive, it is not that memory preserves places perfectly. It is that places sometimes preserve a small part of us until we are ready to notice them again. This concludes archive entry 006. The record is sealed. The street remains familiar. The lamps remain lit. The way home remains remembered. End transmission.